Hello, I'm your host Jim McClean. Welcome back to another episode of the Banterflix movie review show here on NvTv. Let's see what movies we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be reviewing Air, which is out in cinemas now. And our pick of the streams is Tetris, which is available to watch now on Apple TV+. So that's what we've lined up for you tonight, and joining me here in the NvTv studio is once again the nicest man in Belfast, local filmmaker Jim McMorrow. Hello to you, Jim.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm good. I should say at this point that I owe you a bit of thanks, Jim, because you've now given me my first ever credit in a short film. I am Campmate 3, I'm going to go with, in one of your latest productions, that is The Magic Spade. Before we get into talking about movie news, do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about that? And the starring role, of course, that I had as in a very small capacity as an extra.
Magic Spade is a production that I was very gratefully asked to direct by Causeway Pictures, which is about a man who's in the woods digging his own grave and begins to tell a story about a magic spade in order to buy some time and maybe get out of jail free card, and mayhem ensues.
Well, we will look forward to when it finally is released, hopefully on the festival circuit here and internationally. And I can just say right at this point, because I'll never be able to review it, because of course I'm in it, and that means I will always be biased. I had a ball on set, and it's great to see you working in doing your thing as director. But with that, let's move on and chat a wee bit about some movie news.
I got this. No problem. Yes!
Come on, Mario! Our big adventure begins now!
Ah! Get it off, get it off, get it off!
There's a huge universe out there with a lot of galaxies. They're all counting on us. No pressure.
So that's a look at Super Mario Brothers. We could have reviewed it this week. We thought we'd maybe talk about something more adult. We will be talking about Air in just a moment. But this has been a film that got quite sniffy reviews from critics, Jim, but has went down really well with audiences. I guess the fact that it's got that Nintendo brand, everybody knows Super Mario, it's coming from the studio that give us the Minions. It has been, I think I'm on record here saying it's the best opening for an animated film in a long time, if not ever. So I'm going to ask you, well, you might have seen it. I don't know how much of a Super Mario Brothers fan you are, but just it gets back to this discussion that we seem to have a lot of the time, is that difference of opinions between critics and audiences. Critics have been sniffy about it, but audiences have clearly voted with their feet. So just your thoughts.
First of all, I do love Super Mario. I was an ardent gamer as a child, and Nintendo was my thing. And I'm marginally interested in seeing the film. I mean, can it live up to the '93 one? Who knows? Time will tell. But I just, regarding, box office numbers versus critical acclaim, it's just an impasse that I think that, films are subjective at the end of the day, and I don't think one should be dictated necessarily by reviews. I don't think people should be dictated by box office numbers. It's a decision you have to make for yourself, and I know for a fact that my wife has no interest in watching the film whatsoever, and that's her choice, and that's absolutely fine. I just don't think nothing would sway her, and I don't think anything should sway one to go see it.
Look, it's stood the test of time with Michael Bay. That man is critic-proof, but still gets bums on seats. To an extent, I know there's been not as most successful of late, but with the Transformers franchise, that was critic-proof. I'm intrigued to see it, but I'm just going to say this to viewers, especially younger viewers, if you're watching, you're never going to go through the heartbreak. Jim mentioned the 93 film. I was there. I got my ticket with my mum. I don't know what Mario Brother films they were watching, they made, but I had to go through that. So I think anyone who goes to get a ticket to that maybe should be forced to watch the 93 film. I don't know. Another bit of movie news, I know just as we started to record, the new trailer has broken for the next big Marvel movie. I know we're going to have Guardians next month, but the Marvels, I'm not excited. I've talked about this ad nauseum, Jim. Comic book movie fatigue. I was ahead of the game. I was talking about this 2-3 years ago. It seems to be creeping up. I don't know if you're excited about this, but I will say from watching the trailer, of all of the MCU movies we've had so far, this seems to be the most where you've had to invest maybe in one of their TV shows in Miss Marvel, as opposed to where before you could just drop in. Are you excited at all? Are you starting to suffer from comic book movie fatigue?
Oh, I've been suffering from superhero fatigue for quite some time. Yeah, I've seen the trailer. I'm not interested at all, and but I do agree with you that when I watched it, I remember kind of thinking, I have no idea who these people are, and is this straight after Captain Marvel? If so, you know, what didn't Endgame happen? And it was just like, you know what, I couldn't be annoyed figuring it out. The Marvel universe is just non-existent to me now. I think it reached an apotheosis in Endgame, and everything after that is filler.
Yeah, spot the teacher using big words. Saying them, yeah, I mean, we're talking about films being box office proof. You know, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, it's done big numbers, not the numbers Marvel and Disney would have hoped for. So who knows? I mean, I know we're going to have Guardians, and it'll be interesting to see by the time the Marvels is out where we are with the MCU, because we'll probably have had even more content on Disney Plus, and I hate talking about that, about films and TV shows content, but I guess that's what it is for Marvel. Look, one thing we were going to talk about just before we move on to this week's reviews, of course, early in the week we had a very brief visit from the American president. Hello, Joe, if you're watching. But I thought it would give us the opportunity to maybe have a look, just for a bit of fun, very briefly, to have a look at some of our favourite fictional movie presidents of all time. And with that, let's have a look at mine.
In a war, people die.
The president is up there with a gun to his head.
I'll do anything to save my family. Don't ask me for something I can't give. You could finish this with one phone call. No. This is the Air Force One break.
So that's Harrison, Get Off My Plane Forward in Air Force One. Can't be topped, Jim. It can't be topped. I've got a few here that I'll maybe throw at you, but very briefly, do you want to give our viewers some of your a brief rundown of some of your favourite American presidents?
Okay, well, I mean, the first one immediately jumped into my head was, of course, Martin Sheen. Mm-hmm. But as we've previously discussed, where do you stop? What film do you let Martin Sheen, shine as in his performance as president? Because let's face it, he was in The West Wing. Mm-hmm. He played Kennedy. And he played Greg Stilson in The Dead Zone, which is one of my favourite movies of all time. So, you know, he's number one for sure. Number two, gotta be Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact. He's, amazing. A president so effortlessly cool. The third one's a little bit off kilter, but and it's kind of fictional, I suppose. But Otis Davis in Bubba Hotep, who plays the African American version of JFK. Which is just hilarious, and I don't know if anybody's seen it, but it turns out that JFK survived the assassination attempt and then was brainwashed by the CIA and died African American. So, ludicrously fun, great. Number 4, I would say, would be Donald Pleasance in Escape from New York, of course. And number 5, of course, Harry Shearer as President Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Simpsons movie.
Good list, Jim. I was worried for a second you weren't going to throw Donald Pleasance in from Escape from New York, but you're a John Carpenter fan. I knew you were always going to get there. I've already let the cat out of the bag. I said right from the get-go Harrison Ford. You've got to throw in Bill Pullman in Independence Day. You know, he's the president. When you were younger, you all aspired. And then on the counter of that, I'm also going to throw Jack Nicholson in from Mars Attacks. And just because we know we're pushed for time, I'm going to throw my own little kind of off-kilter list. Lloyd Bridges in Hot Shots, Part 2. Who does not mind? That is someone a bit like Leslie Nielsen, who's also a fictional president in the Scary Movie franchise. Don't really want to talk about those too much, but Lloyd Bridges, Hot Shots Part 2, just absolutely makes me laugh every time. But that's a little bit of fun. I thought we'd take that time. If anybody else has any other presidents they want to throw out, by all means, drop us an email or get in touch via social media. But with that, Jim, let's move on and let's talk about this week's big release.
You ask me what I do here. This is what I do. I find you players, and I feel it this time. Yeah, okay, it's risky. When you were selling sneakers out of the back of your Plymouth, that was risky. Don't change that now.
For a rookie?
Yes.
Who's never set foot on an NBA court.
That's the literal definition of rookie, yeah.
What's the plan?
We build a shoe line around just him. I need the greatest basketball shoe that's ever been made.
Who's the player?
Michael Jordan.
Your motor is
You have our attention.
tonight. You show up at the house.
I believe in this son. I believe he's the future. And his story is gonna make us want to fly. But the shoe is just a shoe.
Until my son steps into it.
So that's a look at Air. It was released in cinemas last week. We're getting a chance to talk about it now. Jim, this kind of tells the story of the genesis of Air Jordans and basically the shoes that saved Nike's business. And I think it's weird to think, because when you watch it, you're like, of course Nike's a big brand, but when we see this film directed by Ben Affleck, back in the early 80s, the company was third choice for many. We had Converse and we had Adidas, and they were leading the way, and along comes Michael Jordan, and the rest is history. I would be interested to see what you think about this. So I don't really want to say it's a sports biopic, because we never actually really see Michael Jordan in the film. It'll be interesting. I think that's something I think we should talk about. We're impressive ensemble cast. We have Matt Damon, Jason Bateman, Viola Davis playing alongside her real-life husband, playing the husband and father of Michael Jordan. Impressive cast. I like Ben Affleck as a director. You know, we all know the saying about Argo. But what did you think about this?
Yeah, I have kind of mixed views on it. I mean, I do love Ben Affleck as a director. I didn't really enjoy Live by Night, but you know, Argo and The Town and Gone Baby Gone are flawless directorial efforts from him. And you know, I love the team of he and Matt Damon when they're in films. I think they do give riveting performances, and you throw in Viola Davis and Jason Bateman, you've got a recipe for something great. The problem is, I don't really think the story was incredibly interesting, and maybe it's because, you know, as a younger man, I was more into basketball, and you know, the Air Jordan brand, the Nike Air Jordan brand, is so forefront in public consciousness. You know, in the screen, you were seeing people wearing, you know, wearing the hats and wearing the shoes and the tracksuits and stuff. So it was a foregone conclusion. Of course, he's going to pick this thing, and maybe that made it a tad more underwhelming than it would have been had I have not been, you know, so aware of the story. The other thing is, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of confused as to what the film was trying to say, because it seemed to be a story about the underdog, and Nike were the underdog, of course, but they were the underdog, you know, with millions of dollars of revenue coming in every year. This wasn't the Karate Kid, you know, and at the point where you think the film's going to, not to spoil anything, but at the point where you think the film's going to be over, there's 3 or 4 sort of epilogues, one of which deals with, you know, licensing rights and the rights to one's image and so forth. And I was just kind of thinking, like, you know, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, am I meant to be inspired by the story of a multimillionaire who became more of a multimillionaire? It just didn't hit home for me. And as I say, I think the story was very uninteresting. That being said, technically it's a very well made movie. As I say, the performances are great. Cinematography by Bob Richardson's wonderful. It just has everything going for it. I just don't think it's that interesting or inspiring of a story, and therefore kind of fell flat for me.
I can't disagree with what you're saying. I did enjoy it, and I guess we've mentioned some of the cast. It's also great to see Chris Tucker back. We have Marlon Wayans in a very small role, and it's just great to see Chris Tucker back on screen again. It's been a while. I mean, I can't remember being on screen since Silver Lining Playbook. It's been a while. It's great to see you back, Chris. But I think it's the performances carried across, and I think front and centre of that is Matt Damon, who I am just growing even more to appreciate as a performer. He does so little. It's a bit like Spielberg. Spielberg makes something and it seems effortless, and it's like, yeah, that's because he's talented. He knows his craft and he's acquired this talent over the years and fine-tuned it. Matt Damon's like that, where he's on screen, he's not doing very much. And there's a great kind of speech, again, I'm not going to spoil, where it's kind of, for me, kind of in kind of that level of kind of Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday, that talk, it's in the trailer, so it's not too much of a spoiler, of, you know, shoes only a shoe until you put someone in, someone puts their foot into it. He's great. Just to pick on what you said, I think what the film should have maybe focused more on, I think there is a sequence in the post-credits where it kind of talks about Matt Damon's character Sonny and kind of things he achieved. That's maybe the story that needed to be told, and it's that sense of appreciating him. But also, you talk about marketing rights and kind of this idea of that the talent should get a cut of the shoes that they sell or the market they endorse. That's probably the story the film needed to tell, in the sense of that set the rule. We think of Ronaldo and all the Cristiano Ronaldo 7 stuff and all that kind of stuff that has come since then. That set the precedent. That's probably the story that probably is the most interesting aspect of it. You've mentioned the fact that Nike's the underdog, the £900 million, whatever it is, revenue a year. They are able to bring home that's kind of the underdog I'd like to be. I enjoyed it. Ben Affleck has this wonderful, unfussy style. You know, there's scenes, and I guess that's down to the cinematography as well, where there's shots going in and out of focus, and I like that because he's not looking for perfection. It's a bit Clint Eastwood-esque. I think it's all the sum of all its parts are what interest me and draw me in. It's got a great jukebox soundtrack. It's got a great opening. It just fills me with nostalgia for a time and place that I wish I was back in. But like you, probably 6-7 months down the line, would want to watch this again. There's a lot going for the film. I think it's an impressive ensemble, as we've already alluded to. It's great to see Chris Tucker back on screen again. I think people might be coming at this now as maybe people who've watched The Last Dance on Netflix. Do you think it's an interesting companion piece, that film, Jim? You know,
if you're looking for the definitive sort of Michael Jordan story, watch The Last Dance on Netflix. I think it's just, it's an infinitely more interesting version, and shows Michael Jordan in a sort of less positive light, but a real light. Whereas in this one, I think it's definitely there in the realms of, you know, idolizing him to perfection, which he just wasn't.
Or just watch Space Jam, Jim. I don't know. You can't win. You know, either The Last Dance, Space Jam. You're going to have a whole new appreciation of Michael Jordan. Just don't bother with Space Jam 2. Michael Jordan didn't. But with that, let's move on to this week's Pick of the Streams.
This is the inventor of Tetris.
Your game is brilliant. I'm gonna make you a millionaire.
Mr. Hodges, have you ever negotiated with the Soviets?
We're here for Tetris.
Вы все здесь только ради денег.
What do you say? I don't speak Russian.
The most powerful man in Communist Party is watching you and your family.
Do you know where your husband is?
What the hell is going on?
The world is changing, and Soviet Union will not be left behind.
You want to play with the big boys? This is how the world works.
Where is my money? This is insane. We can't protect you.
Sometimes you gotta forget the rules. This is criminal. The Soviet Union is about to implode. They're lying. Everybody's lying.
Go home! The cavalry is coming.
We don't have time.
I have a plan.
So that's a look at Tetris, available now on Apple TV+. This is directed by Jon S. Baird. We have Taron Egerton in the starring role. I'm sure, like me, Jim, you had a Game Boy at one point in your life. And you've probably played Tetris at one point in your life. Have you ever thought to yourself, I'd like to know how this came to be? Well, now Apple are way ahead of you. Now they know that there is a film out there. So this is, as we mentioned, we've already talked about one biopic of sorts, and you know, the genesis of Air Jordans. Now we have a film that's talking about the genesis of Tetris and taking us into the murky world of the Soviet Union, and we have Robert Maxwell thrown in there into the mix as well. So this is available on Apple TV Plus now. What do you think?
Tetris and Air are very interesting companion pieces. It was a hell of a double bill to watch, because I did watch them essentially at the same time. I think that, you know, what Tetris has going for it is nostalgia factor, because, you know, I am old enough to remember what it was like to break out a Game Boy and have that tiny, really bad contrasty screen when you were trying, with a magnifying glass on top of it, just so I could see it. So it brought back an awful lot of nostalgic memories for me, and that is always a plus. I think that it has some amazing performances. Taron Egerton's great, and maybe Bass, but I think local actor Anthony Boyle completely steals the show in every scene. He's amazing. And, you know, coming on the back of sort of TV shows like Chernobyl, and in the current political climate, it's very interesting to see the USSR portrayed, you know, as at the end of its time, when it was sort of starting to embrace capitalism and, you know, renege communism. That was all very, very interesting, and as a result you would think the film was just this, you know, absolute juggernaut of entertainment after, you know, one scene after another, because it has so much going on. It isn't, unfortunately. I think the problem with it is that it runs out of steam after a while, and there are very, very wonderful visual flourishes in it. Like, there's a lot of establishing shots of 8-bit graphics, and a car chase that happens, and when the cars impact, you know, with things, they turn into 8-bit graphics, and, you know, the gamer in me loves that type of stuff. The problem is that I just found myself kind of going, I think I'm done. I think I'm starting to lose my. I'm starting to lose my focus here, because I'm losing interest, and I found myself kind of just like, I did check my phone at one time, because it was just like, I just need, you know, I'm not interested anymore. I need to get to the end of this.
I had a pretty similar experience to you. I think the visual nods are nice. I mean, that style, and the director has done that before. I mean, I'm a big fan of Filth. I know it's not the most ideal film talking about kind of subject matter pre-Watershed, but I think it's great. I mean, I love that film. He's also worked on Vinyl as well. First couple episodes of the Scorsese produced series that unfortunately got cancelled. He's a filmmaker I like. Like you, I think he comes at this with a lot of energy, channeling Edgar Wright at time in the style, and that charm finally kind of, I like you, ran out of steam for me. There's the car chase sequence that is over the top, and it's a bit silly. The people in real life have said, no, it never happened. You know, that just didn't happen. There's sequences they got that they say is right and truthful, but that just never happened. And it's like, right, we need a big finish. We can't just have them drive to the airport. We'll have this sequence. And it feels very much off kilter with the rest of the film. I'm a massive fan of Taron Egerton. I know he's also in Blackbird, which is on Apple TV Plus as well, which is a series rather than a film. He's a great performer. The soundtrack is great. Never has a composer in memory used such a small amount of that iconic tune from Tetris and expanded it into a full score. Who knew we needed it? I think it's great. There's a lot of charm. There's a lot of style to it. Of the two films we've reviewed this week, I probably prefer Air, but I would probably say Tetris is an easier film to sit back and recommend to people. My mother watched it, my wife watched it with me, we were all together over Easter. My mum was never bored watching Tetris. I know that my lovely wife got a little bit restless during Air, And I think she's maybe a fan of Tetris, more so because of Taron Egerton, but the less said about that, Amber, the better. I like both films this week. I think Tetris is interesting. The reason why I have picked the two is the producers, Amazon, thought that Air was strong enough to get a theatrical release. We don't know at this stage what kind of numbers it's done in the box office, but Apple TV has sent Tetris straight to streamers. It's not getting a cinematic release. And I know this has become a very tired and tested argument on this TV show each week about where would you rather see this stuff. I do think in my heart of hearts that Tetris would find an audience at the cinema. We've just seen the success of Super Mario Brothers. I know it's very different, but it's Nintendo. I don't know. Maybe kids want to go see Super Mario Brothers. They might want to go see Tetris. I don't know. But just as we wrap up, Jim, just your thoughts on that, the sense that here's two biopics. One, producers have felt strong enough. Maybe we have Matt Damon, we've Ben Affleck, we've the Michael Jordan attachment. That gets a cinema release. It will go on Amazon Prime at some point. We know that. But here's another title, like Tetris, which I think we agree, it's not perfect, but it's fun. I would happily pay my money to go see that in the cinema, as opposed to, not that I have a problem with Apple TV, I think of the streamers, it's doing some very interesting, putting out some interesting content right now. But it's a shame that it's not getting theatrically released.
No, I would agree, and I think that it's a shame that studios like Amazon and Apple Plus and so forth kind of fear box office returns as being this this death knell, and maybe it is. Unfortunately, that's kind of the way. As David Fincher once said, you have to carve it into marble. Whatever your opening weekend is, that was the response to your film. And no matter how much history sort of disproves that, with films like Shawshank Redemption and It's a Wonderful Life and Vertigo and so forth, the public don't ever really seem to realize it, and studios really don't ever seem to realize it. And I think it's a shame that cinema is maybe slowly becoming the franchise heaven. It's the place to go see the 4th, 5th, 6th installment of a franchise, or the opening installment of what the studio hopes becomes a franchise, and maybe more character-driven pieces and smaller budgets like Air and Tetris kind of get in the way of that and interrupt multiplex screenings of Dungeons and Dragons and John Wick 4, both of which are fine films, but it's a shame that cinema loses out on the lower scale stuff.
Yeah, it's true. I know earlier this week I was reading Josh Brolin was talking about that's why probably we won't get a third installment in the Sicario series, because studios aren't prepared to take those risks. But look, that's a discussion for another time. But before we go, let's have a look at what movies we'll be talking about next week.
Are you here for the meeting? Well, come on.
No! Some call me the Dark One, others the Lord of Death. To most, I am black.
Okay, obviously we're dealing with a little bit more than just narcissism here.
So that's a look at Renfield and Moon Age Daydream, which we'll be talking about next week. I know we're nearly out of time, Jim, but you excited about those films? I know you haven't seen Renfield just yet, but I don't know if you've seen Moon Age Daydream, the Bowie documentary on Netflix?
No, I haven't. I'm excited about Renfield, Nicolas Cage's Dracula, What's Not to Love, and my wife has seen Moon Age Daydream and really liked it, so I will check it out on Netflix at some point.
Okay, so there we go. We'll have to wait to see what our critic next week thinks of those two titles, but all that's left for me to do now is thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching at home. We'll be back next week with another episode, but for now, until then, goodbye.